Welcome to Strong Legends, daily sci-fi stories that fuel your mind. Subscribe and join the legend.
The twin suns of Serenoa 5 had barely pierced the perpetual haze when Naira pressed her palm to the cracked earth, feeling the dull pulse of fertility, if one could even call it that. She closed her eyes, inhaling the acrid tang of chemical runoff that clung to every breeze. Golden dust swirled around her wrists, stirred by a restless wind that carried with it the promise of another brutal day. Already the horizon seemed smeared with a brownish haze, a reminder that this planet was no Eden. It had long since surrendered its verdant past to the planetary terraforming experiments of the old Imperium. Now, small pockets of bioengineered crops clung to life by sheer force of will, and by the mercy of flimsy ration pods delivered once a day. Naira opened her eyes and stood, the coarse fabric of her tunic scratching against her sunburned arms. Beyond her lay the small plot of land she and her daughters tended, 40 meters of struggling stalks that looked more like brittle twigs than the wheat their ancestors once harvested. She drew in a long breath and balanced a shovel on her shoulder, listening to the faint scrape of metal against dry rock. Each swing she took pressed the shovel deeper into the earth, but resistance was a constant. For all their genetic modifications, the seeds these plains had accepted offered little in return. The soil had been poisoned, saturated by experimental coolant leaks and acidic byproducts. To coax a harvest here felt like tilting at windmills. Slender figure appeared at the edge of the field. Lyra, Nira's elder twin, with Sema trailing behind. Both girls dragged battered buckets filled with the previous day's crop, handfuls of pale, stunted sprouts riddled with brittle fungus. Their faces were hollowed by hunger, their ribs showing through thin shirts. Nira set the shovel against a nearby trough and beckoned them closer. "Sit," she said, voice gentle but firm. She motioned toward a narrow trench filled with yellowish slurry, a mixture of leftover rainwater and nutrient concentrate. "Eat slowly. Remember, we need enough to germinate the next round." Lyra and Sema knelt, dipping spoonfuls of the nutrient gel into their mouths. The elder twin chewed methodically, her dark eyes flicking between Naira's face and the hazy skyline. Sema ate too quickly, gulping down the thick paste as though it were the sweetest ambrosia. Naira watched them for a moment, longing for the days when their laughter had filled the air instead of the sickly stench of death. She fought back tears and wiped her brow, smearing dirt across her forehead, a ritual born of fatigue more than superstition. "We have to finish seeding before the sun scorches the ground," Naira said, her tone brokering no argument. She lifted one of the new seed packets from a worn satchel at her side. 3 grams of modified Triton 9 strain, capable of tolerating polluted soils but slow to germinate. With hands rough from months of toil, she planted each grain, spacing them precisely 1 meter apart. Even this method felt archaic. Nira longed for the days when an automaton could handle this chore in minutes. But credits were scarce, and she could not afford to pawn what little mechanical assistance she had left. Halfway through the second row, she paused and stared down at the field. The sky overhead was a dull peach, thickened by the haze of chemical particulates. A distant hum tickled her ears, at first so faint she thought it might be another hallucination born of sleep deprivation. She knelt and pressed a finger to the soil, feeling no vibration. Yet the hum persisted, growing louder by the second until she had to cup her hands over her ears to block it out. "What is that?" Lyra asked, standing beside her. She shaded her eyes and scanned the horizon. "Is it a dust storm?" Naira shook her head. "No. Dust storms are farther north this season." She rose slowly and scanned the sky. "Stay here and finish eating. I'll check it out." She bid Sema remain with her sister, then hefted her shovel again, ready to move toward the sound. Whatever it was. The hum had become a low mechanical roar, like some distant engine spinning up for liftoff. She clambered over the furrowed earth, the twins' worried faces pressed against her back. The peal of tarnished metal and whine of turbines grated against her nerves. Probably one of the few independent freighters that still dared to land here, scavenging for scrap or talent to press into labor. The government had long since banned private landings without explicit clearance. Naira suspected she would find enforcers demanding to search her holdings for illicit tech or contraband crops. As she neared the field's margin, the source of the sound revealed itself. A battered spacecraft, patched with mismatched alloys, hovered a few meters above the ground. Its single engine spat out gusts of heated air that kicked up swirling dust devils, wiping her eyes with gritty debris. The hull was a collage of scars, pitted plating and welded seams that hinted at years of use and hasty repairs. No listing government regalia or corporate insignia adorned it. Instead, a series of hand-painted symbols, faded by time and sun, circled its fuselage. It looked as though someone had cobbled it together out of second-hand parts, scavenged from half a dozen ports. Nira stared, heart hammering as the landing struts extended. The ship thudded down on scorched ground, sending a cloud of fine gray dust spiraling upward. The roar tapered off, replaced by the hiss of exhaust valves and the occasional clank of settling metal. She took a cautious step back, eyes narrowed. If local enforcers were nearby, they would have picked up this unauthorized touchdown already. No, these weren't government types. Someone else was here. Someone neither corporate nor provincial. Then a hatch on the side of the vessel slid, open with a hydraulic hiss. Naira's pulse quickened. From within the dimly lit interior, a tall figure emerged, draped head to toe in tattered ash-colored robes. A coarse hood concealed most of the person's face, though Naira glimpsed a pair of eyes that burned with an unnatural, iridescent glow, green-blue flecks drifting beneath pale skin. In one gaunt hand, the figure clutched a small sack that glittered faintly beneath the harsh sunlight. Naira's breath caught. She felt the weight of every eye in the field shift toward her, even though no one else was present. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Lyra and Sema crept closer behind her, eyelashes flecked with dust, watching the stranger with wary fascination. The tall figure, alien in silhouette, stepped forward onto the ruined, tilled earth. As the heat shimmered off the soil, the stranger extended the arm holding the sack. Its voice, though faint, carried clearly across the distance. Human, the accent was strange, a melodic cadence that dipped and rose in unexpected places. I will work your fields. Just feed my hungry children. Naira froze, each word echoing in her mind. Hunger. Hungry children. The stranger's words felt rehearsed, measured, but the desperation in their voice was palpable. Behind the flickered glow of the stranger's eyes, Naira sensed infinite sorrow. A refugee's sorrow, not the calculating coldness of a pirate or corporate agent. And yet she could not be certain. The ration pods she received each morning were barely enough. They'd save her daughters for only days more. How could she risk this stranger's technology, if that sack truly held more seed than she had seen in months? Lyra and Sema pressed against their mother's legs, and Naira felt her throat tighten. She wanted to turn away, to sprint back to the relative safety of their hut, but something in the stranger's stance rooted her to the spot. The wind carried a faint chime of mechanical whir, like the undercurrent of semi-sentient electronics, hidden within that sack. What are you? Her voice came out hoarse, laced with equal parts suspicion and hope. The stranger lowered the hood, revealing features that took Naira's breath away. The skin was blue-black, marked with intricate, bioluminescent tattoos that spiraled over slender cheekbones and a sharp jawline. Her ears were pointed, reminiscent of long-lost Terran myths about elves. Her eyes, luminous and reflective, seemed to contain entire starfields. Thin, iridescent eyebrows arched above them. The stranger's hair, impossible to discern beneath. The hood seemed to move with a faint, slow ripple as though alive with its own consciousness. I am Rival of Ithaden, the stranger said, voice soft but unwavering. The alien held the sack before them like a treasure. My children starve. We fled our world 10 cycles ago when Ithaden's core collapsed, a cataclysm no longer fixed, to one realm. We have drifted through 15 systems, scavenging what we can. Until now we've survived on charity. Soon our food stores will be empty. Rival knelt and unfastened the small sack, revealing seeds that shimmered like liquid opal. Each kernel was large, triple the size of any Triton 9 variety Naira had ever seen. The iridescent shells cast fractal rainbows on the dusty soil, droplets of hope glowing amid the barren landscape. Naira's eyes widened. The seeds looked almost alive, as if they could sprout at any moment, hungry for a host. How did you get these? Naira whispered, stepping forward. She craned to touch. A single grain. Even from a distance, she could sense a faint heartbeat-like pulse emanating from the sac, as though each seed contained its own miniature ecosystem. Revel's glowing eyes flickered, pale tendrils of light drawing out patterns on her cheeks. These are Ithodon truth seeds, she explained. Each is embedded with a living neural matrix that bonds with local terraforming bacteria. It purges toxins, harmonizes with existing flora, and accelerates growth. In 3 days, a field sown with these will yield enough to feed a small settlement for a cycle. In 7 days, enough for an entire region. Naira felt her heart hammer. That's impossible, she stammered. On Serenoa 5, the fastest, germination tech still required weeks of specialized fertilizer, careful environmental control, and endless credits to maintain. The government will hunt you for this. They'll take everything, seed, ship, and you. Revel nodded, her eyes shadowed. I know. I have no illusions. We are hunted across systems, but I've no choice. She extended a slender hand. I will work your fields. I will till, sow, and harvest. Just feed my children until then. Nira's gaze snapped to the edge of the field, where the twins sat in the dirt, shovels abandoned. Lyra and Sema looked back at her, faces drawn and expectant, as though already sensing a chance at salvation. And yet, every instinct told her, do not trust an Ithodon stranger. Tales circulated of planets wiped out when Ithodon tech went wrong, seeds that consumed everything but left infertile moons in their wake. The fine line between salvation and catastrophe had cost entire colonies their lives. But Naira had already gambled with worse odds, including the chance that Reval wouldn't actually provide as promised, or that raiders might descend with corporate guns and strip the seeds away before harvest. She swallowed, feeling her resolve harden. Behind her, Lyra stood, eyes bright with something Naira hadn't seen in weeks: hope. All right, Naira said, voice firm. We'll do this together. But know this. If you betray my daughters... She let the threat linger in the scorched air. Revel inclined her head, eyes solemn but unblinking. I understand, Revel replied. She offered Naira a small, respectful nod. Alien courtesy, Naira realized. We leave no trace. We sow only what the land will accept. A distant hum scraped the horizon as a government survey drone passed overhead, scanning in concentric waves. Naira turned her head just enough to see its rotating sensor dish glinting in the amber light. Fear clawed at her chest. If the drone detected a single anomalous reading, an unexpected spike in chlorophyll fluorescence, a neural signature misaligned with sanctioned agritech, Naira and Reval would be branded criminals. There would be no compromise. Reval met her gaze, and in that moment Naira sensed something else. Desperation outweighed caution. Revel's entire race, or whatever remained of it, hinged on these few sacks of seed. Naira realized that without these seeds, she might starve next cycle, and her daughters would be lost to malnutrition. She weighed her family's survival against the risk of discovery. There was only one rational choice. Let's get to work then, Naira said, turning to the field. She hefted her shovel with renewed purpose. Teach me how to plant them. I'll guard these seeds with my life. Reval nodded and began unpacking the rest of the sack, revealing another handful of glowing kernels. As Reval knelt in the dirt, gently placing seeds and covering them with fine grit soil, Naira noticed that the field seemed to tremble beneath Revel's touch. Wisps of phosphorescent spores drifted off the buried seeds, hanging in eddies that caught the early sunlight like drifting embers. Lyra and Sema joined them, eyes wide as they watched the process. Reval looked up at them with a soft smile, and the twins tentatively stepped forward. Together, the four of them measured distance, poked the soil, and pressed the seeds into place. Naira felt a cold thrill as each seed pulsed faintly against her fingers, strange living artifacts that might just turn this planet's fate. All around them, the fields lay silent, still in anticipation. The sun climbed higher, its rays burning away the lingering haze and revealing the harsh contours of Serenoafi's scarred landscape. Yet within that small patch of earth, Naira sensed something new, latent potential pushing up against a history of death. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might be different. As the final seed slipped into its furrow, Naira glanced again at Rival. "We'll need water," she said, "and fertilizer." Rival closed a small pack at her hip and unclasped a sleek metallic canister. When she opened it, a fine turquoise mist puffed into the air. Naira recognized it as the same microbial nectar used in the initial germ support stages of some high-end crops, but on a scale far beyond anything the local farmers could produce. She murmured a silent prayer as Rival drenched the field in the living mist, watching microscopic organisms swirl through the freshly planted rows. Single drop of that solution had cost a fortune on the black market. To simply release it across Naira's entire field was luxury beyond measure. But here in Rival's hands it was merely routine. Even as she watched, Naira felt a tremor through the soil, vibrations so soft they might have been a heartbeat pulsing from the planet itself. Tiny emerald sprouts flickered upward, breaking through the surface in synchronized waves that stopped her breath. The shock of seeing the seeds transform almost instantly was nearly overwhelming. It was as if she had witnessed a miracle. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Lyra and Sema stared in wonder, mouths agape. Revel's glowing tattoos shimmered brighter, as though illuminated by an inner fire. Naira felt tears sting her eyes, not from sorrow or anger, but from an unexpected surge of hope. Then a sudden crackle of intercepted static from the sky snapped her back. The government drone had collected its data and was turning toward them, suspicious readings flickering on its interface. Naira's heart pounded as she ran to a battered console on her belt, a jerry-rigged jammer that she had stolen from a raid months ago. She punched in a sequence of codes and the console emitted a brief, high-pitched chirp. The drone's humming faltered. Its downward lens glowed orange. For a heartbeat, Naira and Revel held their breath. Then, the drone banked away and sped off, apparently convinced that nothing unusual lingered below. Only when its sensor dish had shrunk into a dot on the horizon did Naira permit herself to exhale. Rival's eyes held a mixture of relief and quiet pride. "You are a skilled farmer," Rival said softly, brushing a wisp of dust from her cheek. "And a cunning strategist." Naira let out a shaky laugh. "I learned from the best. My mother." She glanced at Lyra and Sema, who were slipping away to gather water from a reclaimed purification pod near the edge of the field. "My family has survived this long by being both, but you've done something impossible." Revel shrugged, a small, rueful smile playing across her lips. "In my world, we were once guardians of worlds. The seeds we sowed here grew as easily as rain. But Ithaden is long gone. Now, I cling to fragments of that legacy to keep my children alive." Naira's gaze sharpened. "Your children, where are they?" Revel's eyes darkened. "They wait on my ship under protective stasis. I can't risk bringing them here until this field can feed all of us. When the harvest comes, if it comes, our children will eat." Naira's chest clenched. One glance at the twins and she understood. These two races, human and Ithaden, were bound by a common thread of desperation. Both struggled for survival on a planet that had betrayed them. In that moment, Naira resolved that if she had any say in it, Revel's children would not die. "Very well," Naira said, her voice resolute. "From now until the harvest, you are one of us. We labor together. My daughters, my neighbors, fate of this land, will rise or fall together." Revel nodded, a solemn pact sealed beneath the blistering sun. She reached out and placed a cool hand on Naira's forearm, and for a fleeting instant, Naira felt the pulse of living energy flow from Rival's skin, life impulses that her body recognized more than her mind could comprehend. A distant thunder of rotors echoed across the plain. As the morning advanced toward midday, shadows stretched long, and the field bloomed with the promise of something new. A small oasis of glowing green pushing back the suffocating brown haze. Nira returned to her shovel, eyes alight with determination. Behind her, Raval worked with fluid, practiced motions, gentle as a weaver threading silk. Lyra and Sama joined in, giggling at how the soil felt under their fingertips. For the first time in many cycles, Nira allowed herself to believe in hope. The stranger's offer, so brazen, so improbable, had become her chance at salvation. If they could keep the drones blind, if the government remained oblivious, if Pandora's box of Ithadan engineering did not turn into a cataclysm, then perhaps, just perhaps, this barren world might bloom again. And if not, well, Nira would die trying. As they labored beneath the cruel suns, Nira's thoughts drifted to her daughter's futures. Would they live long enough to taste fresh bread? Would they ever feel safe again? The questions swirled like dust in the wind, but for once they did not overwhelm her. Because with Reval at her side, she felt something she had not felt in years. The fragile stirrings of hope, fed by the promise of alien seed and a stranger's desperate plea. And sometimes that was enough to keep a family alive. The morning sun had barely cleared the twin horizons of Serenoa Fiv when Nira awoke to the soft glow of phosphorescent spores drifting through the slit in her cottage wall. The air was cool, a brief reprieve before the midday heat would rise, and Nira could hear the faint rustle of Raval's measured breathing beside her. Beneath the thin covering of reclaimed fabric, Nira lay sleepless, gaze fixed on Raval's bioluminescent tattoos as they pulsed faintly in the darkness, each slight flicker a reminder that the alien woman's life, and her children's fate, now depended on these field trials. Lyra and Sama lay curled at the foot of the narrow sleeping mat, their faces softened by exhaustion. Nira glanced at the nutrient gel packs, saved them for morning sustenance, and rose quietly. She stepped outside into the dawn light to find Raval already tending to the first of the newly sprouted rows, her delicate fingers brushing over the emerald green stalks as though greeting old friends. Tiny motes of bioluminescence danced above the seedlings, drifting like fireflies in the half-darkness. Nira swallowed a sigh and bent to scoop a handful of cool water from the barrel at the cottage's edge. She poured a thin stream across the base of each plant, listening to the hiss as liquid met newly enriched soil. Even now, after the outrageously rapid germination, these plants needed careful care, just enough moisture to awaken the neural matrices in each seed without drowning the delicate roots. Revel rose and turned toward her, eyes flickering with gratitude and something like relief. "It worked," she whispered. "Yesterday I feared the soil would reject them, but your ancestors must have whispered secrets into these fields long ago. They accept us." Nira shrugged, wiping muddy hands on her tunic. "I just prepared the ground, but these seeds, they're more alive than any bioengineered strain I've ever seen. I've farmed in conditions far harsher than this, but nothing sprouts overnight." She adjusted her grip on a narrow hoe and drifted among the rows, loosening the soil around each stalk's base. "We need to ensure they root deeply. Any lapse and the afternoon heat will wither them." Reval nodded, stepping in to help. Together they worked in companionable silence, the only sound the scrape of metal against earth and the occasional chirp of a distant insect. Lyra and Sama arrived, rubbing sleep from their eyes, and took up spades to clear stray rocks from the furrows. The twins moved in rhythm, their youthful shoulders squared with determination. They'd watched Nira and Reval shape this field, and now, each new task felt sacred, as if they were tending not only to plants, but to a greater promise of survival. By mid-morning, the field had transformed from barren brown into rippling swathes of verdant stalks, each crowned with a single pair of shimmering leaves. A faint hum of microbial activity pulsed from the soil, proof that Reval's nutrient solution had activated the symbiotic bacterial colonies beneath the surface. The row patterns curved organically, guided by Nira's careful planning, channels for irrigation, pits for excess moisture to drain, raised berms to catch cooling night breezes. This was no haphazard patch of alien flora. It was a meticulously engineered oasis born of two worlds' knowledge. Lyra paused in her task and looked up at her mother. "Mama, when will they be ready to harvest?" she asked. Her voice wavered. Between curiosity and cautious hope, Nira crouched beside her, brushing dust from the stalks. "If the rains hold and Rival's bacteria continue to cleanse the toxins, we'll start seeing grain heads within 4 solar turns, just over 3 days. Then a full cycle of growth, about 7 sols, before we gather enough to feed a small settlement." She felt a thrill run through her at the careful math. 15 days at most. Sema's eyes widened. 15 days until we have real grain, like flour and bread. She reached out to stroke a leaf, and a single droplet of dew formed, glinting in the sunlight as though gold. Revel knelt and placed a comforting hand atop Sema's head. "Not just bread, little one. In 20 days, if all goes well, these fields will yield enough to feed my people on Ithaden for a month. Another few cycles and we might restore balance to their homeland." She met Nyra's gaze. "I will not let you down, nor my children." Nyra nodded, swallowing hard. The twins' happiness warred with the nagging fear in her gut. What if government drones circled back with higher resolution sensors? Yesterday's jammer had bought them precious hours, but it wouldn't block all spectrums forever. And if the anomalies deep under the soil betrayed them, the plant growth would be deemed illegal, and everyone here would pay the price. At that moment, an irritating hum sliced through the quiet. The unmistakable buzz of a survey drone, thin as a hornet, banking low above the field. Its sensor array pivoted, sweeping the land in concentric waves. Nyra's chest tightened. She set her jaw and clutched Reval's arm. "Freeze." She motioned for the girls to step behind a row, vanishing into the waving stalks. Revel remained still, as though rooted herself, letting the drone's sensor pulses wash over her. Lyra and Sema crouched behind her, small bodies trembling. Against the vantage of the rising sun, the drone's silhouette gleamed, a fragile, fragile threat. From within the grain's collective hum, Nyra felt an almost electric tingle, as if the plants themselves sensed danger. Her knuckles whitened on Reval's arm. The drone dipped closer, its rotating scanner catching the photonic signature of each grain's neural matrix. But Nyra had worked fast. She and Reval had spun a fine mesh of scrim wire over selected rows, wired to a homemade field jammer. As the drone hovered, recordings of Phoenix Shrike songs, a series of false acoustics, blared in microbursts, confusing its auditory sensors. The pelagic shimmer of dust, kicked up by an earlier dust devil, coated the lens in amber grit. For a heartbeat, the drone swayed as though disoriented. Then, just as suddenly, it banked away, ascending in a lazy arc until it was a glint against the ivory sky. Nyra exhaled, trembling. She sank to her knees in the soft earth, pressing her palm against the ground as if seeking its pulse. The plants were silent again, but she could still feel them, alive with latent potential. Reval knelt beside her, shoulders slumped, gaze distant. "Your deflection was brilliant," Reval murmured, her voice a hushed echo. She pressed a cool fingertip to Nyra's wrist. "It bought us time." Nyra forced a weak smile. "Time is all we have. But we can't keep fooling them forever." She rose to stand among the row of seedlings. The younger roots were only 2 fingers deep, still vulnerable to scorching winds or shallow blight. "We need to accelerate the next phase, the thicker stalks and branching nodes, so that by day 4 we have real biomass to shield the soil. It will change the spectral readings." Reval nodded. "I have additional catalyst pods in my pack, microcolonies of the summer strain biomycelia. If we inject them at the nodes, they'll fuse with the seedlings' root networks and strengthen them from within. The fields will appear to be nothing more than aggressive variants of sanctioned Triton 9. They'll blend in spectrally and chemically." Nyra eyed Reval's pack, sleek, metallic, etched with alien runes. If she opened it now, she risked exposing every one of the pods to government sensors. but refusing to use the mycelia meant risking the plants collapsing in soil toxins. "Do it," she said, swallowing a fresh wave of unease. "I trust you." Reval reached into the pack and produced 6 small cylindrical capsules, each no larger than a finger. They gleamed with shifting internal light, and Nera felt an almost hypnotic tingle as they surfaced. Reval knelt at the first row and carefully sliced the leafy stem's base with a thin scalpel. From the capsule, she extracted a microscopic cluster of white biotendrils, which she pressed into the node where stem met root. The tendrils writhed like tiny worms, burrowing instantly into the plant's vascular core. For an instant, the seedling quivered, then straightened as though infused with newfound vigor. A faint green glow radiated from the node, spreading along the stalk. "She's alive," Lyra whispered, stepping forward to peer at the process. "Mama, look, it's like the plant came alive." Her voice wavered with excitement. Naira knelt beside her. "Yes, but this needs precision." She gently guided Lyra's hand to steady the stem. "Hold it like this. We have only one chance." Under Reval's instruction, Nera, Lyra, and Sima took turns pressing the microcolonies into each row's newly forming nodes. Each time they did so, the plant's base glowed briefly before settling into a sturdy, upright posture. By midday, the entire field shimmered with delicate green luminescence, each stalk thrumming with microbial power. Naira surveyed the result, with a mixture of pride and trepidation. The field now looked less like a simple test plot and more like an otherworldly forest, its roots pulsing with life beneath the surface. The watery light of the seeds clashed almost violently with the harsh glare of Serenoa's sun, creating ripples of shimmering heat above each row. "Now," Reval said, voice firm, "we shield the field. By tomorrow, these plants will be 4 times taller. Their leaves will block the soil from sensors. We'll need to camouflage the perimeters too. Spark dust and color dust. Something to disguise the spectral signatures." Naira nodded, rising. "I'll rig the old sensor jammers around the berms. Lyra, Sema, collect as much tarnished metal as you can from the scrap heaps near the south wall. We'll grind it into fine-grained dust to coat the edges. It'll refract the scanner beams." The twins scrambled away, leaving Naira and Reval alone, among the rippling stalks. Sweat beaded on Naira's brow as she watched Reval gather supplies from a pack. The alien woman's hands moved with natural confidence, an effortless knowledge born of worlds Naira could scarcely imagine. Yet for all Reval's otherness, there was a shared devotion here, a commitment to nurture life in a land that had long been forsaken. Reval paused and met Naira's eyes. "Yesterday, you risked everything to protect these seeds. Why?" Her gaze was steady, curious, no hint of judgment. "You could have abandoned your land. You could have fled with your daughters into the wastelands, yet you stayed." Nera exhaled sharply, knives of wind pressing against her ribs. She kneeled to trace a hand through the roots of a single stalk. "Because I grew up hearing stories of this world before the terraforming wars, of rivers so clear you could see stones at the bottom, of forests that sang with life." She paused, gaze distant. "When this planet died, I felt it in my bones. My mother died trying to coax crops from tainted sludge. My sisters starved when I was too young to understand why. I swore I would not let my daughters go hungry." Her hand closed around the stalk, gentle but firm. "You offered me a chance to save them. If I fail now, if these plants die or the government finds us, they'll starve." Again, Reval reached out and took Naira's hand in both of hers, blue-black skin cool against Naira's. "We will not fail," she promised. "My children depend on this. Their life is bound to these fields as much as yours." She smiled, a flicker of luminescence in her eyes. "And someday, together, we'll bring Ithidin's warmth back to the stars." The twins returned, dragging heavy sacks of fragmented metal. They dumped the shards at Naira's feet, panting from exertion. Naira nodded, approvingly. "Good. Help me grind these with the millstone by the granary." Lyra and Sema exchanged excited glances. This was more meaningful labor than any ration pod scavenging. Within an hour, a fine gray powder lay at their feet. Naira scooped it into pouches, tying each with a length of cord salvaged from broken irrigation lines. We'll spread this around the perimeter, 3 paces deep, 3 paces out. She squared her shoulders. We begin at dusk when the patrol drones are least active. Rival, can you rig the color dust projectors along the rows? Rival nodded. I have 4 pods left. With nimble precision, she calibrated each to fire a dispersed plume of tinted dust that, when carried by the wind, would scatter over the plants in a shifting cloak of ochre and emerald. By mid-cycle, this will blend with their natural bioluminescence and confuse any close-range scans. The drones will see nothing but a strange mutated strain and illusions of churning pollen. They won't risk landing to inspect. Naira studied her partner, noting how the alien's tattoos glowed brighter as she spoke, each pattern shifting in time with Rival's heartbeat. It struck Naira that in another life, these fields might have been Rival's home, plains of violet grass and whispering forests, not this blackened dust. You've done this before, Naira said softly. You know how to hide worlds. How did you? Rival interrupted with a wistful smile. I was once a gardener for the Ithadan Queen herself, she said. We maintained forests that could spin oxygen into starlight. But when Ithadan's core collapsed, all my teachings became matters of lore. I've been a wanderer ever since, gathering scraps of knowledge to keep my children safe. She laid a hand over her heart. This field is our chance to honor the old ways, to prove that even when worlds die, life can still bloom. Naira felt a lump rise in her throat. She rose and placed a hand on Revel's shoulder. Then tomorrow we prepare for patrol drones again, but tonight we save our people. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they labored until the first stars touched the sky. Revel calibrated the last of her projectors, tiny spheres of chameleon dust that would drift and swirl like living camouflage. Nira laid out the jamming coils and the makeshift dust banks around the field's edges. Lyra and Sema worked at her side, eager to be entrusted with tasks of true consequence. By the time darkness fully settled, the field was wrapped in a shroud of anticipation. Seedlings glowing faintly from within, their roots anchored in living bacterial networks, their stalks ready to burst to life by first light. Revel pressed a soft kiss to Naira's cheek. Rest, Naira. Tomorrow we begin the next phase. Our children depend on it. Naira nodded, exhaustion tugging at her limbs. But sleep eluded her. Instead, she stood at the ridge overlooking the field, watching tiny motes of green drift above. The soil like drifting stars. The wind carried a soft chime of alien laughter, Revel's lullaby to her unborn plants, echoing across the silent plain. In that moment, Naira allowed herself to believe that they would survive, that 2 worlds' knowledge and a mother's fierce resolve might mend the scars of this planet. And as the twin suns of Serenoa Fiv gave way to the pale light of its moons, Naira whispered into the darkness, May the old spirits bless this ground. Grow strong, grow true, grow for us all. In the cold hours before dawn, the field hummed with hidden energy. Seeds pulsing with life, roots weaving through poisoned soil, and 2 mothers standing watch over their children's futures. Tomorrow, the real test would come. To withstand the scrutiny of the province's drones, to shelter the field beneath layers of illusion, and to prove that this fragile alliance could defeat despair. For Naira, Reval, Lyra, and Sema, hope had only just begun to unfurl its roots. But with each passing moment, the promise of a harvest edged closer, an affirmation that even in the harshest places, life finds a way. The sky above Serenoa 5 shimmered with pale gold as dawn crept over the distant hills. Nira, Revel, Lyra, and Sema stood at the edge of the field, each holding a slender stalk of ripening grain. In only 20 sols, the seedlings had shot up into towering stalks nearly as tall as Reval herself, their bioluminescent veins pulsing faintly beneath olive-green leaves. Tiny seed heads, iridescent pearls of nourishment, crowded every branch. This was no mere test plot, it was a living promise. Naira inhaled deeply, tasting the dust-laced air. The bacterial networks beneath their feet had cleansed the soil to a surprising degree. The once poisoned earth now teemed with microbial activity, proof that Ithaden truth seeds were more than rumor. She felt a lump in her throat as she surveyed the harvest. Enough grain to feed a small city for a cycle, and enough excess to smuggle off-world for Rival's people. All that stood between them and salvation was the task of gathering and securing these precious kernels. "Today we reap," Rival murmured, voice low with reverence. She knelt before a stout stalk, and, with Talonric's scissors, an Ithaden tool that glowed faintly blue, she snipped through the thick stem. A cascade of dewy pollen drifted upward, bathing her in a glittering haze. "May the old guardians of Ithaden bless this harvest." Naira knelt beside her, helping to cradle the ripening heads in woven cloth sacks. "Be careful," she warned. "We must work fast. Word travels quickly in Serenoa's settlements. If anyone hears of this yield, they'll descend with guns and drones." Rival offered a soft nod, then gestured to Lyra and Sema. "Girls, gather the sacks and bring them to the clearing beyond the north ridge. There, you'll find a storage cache I prepared." Both twins darted into the stalks, heads bent to cradle, grain tightly against their chests. Within moments, the field rang with the sound of diligent cutting. Nira and Rival moved in synchronous rhythm, harvesting each stalk and bundling the grain with practiced care. As they worked, Nira felt the soft hum of living tissue under her fingertips, a vibration that whispered of countless neural linkages among seed, fungus, and soil. Serenoa Phi had never known such unity. It was as if the land itself was joining them in celebration. After 3 cycles of labor under the morning sun, they stood back to let their daughters finish the last rows. The field, once a dancing sea of emerald, now lay brown and bare, every stalk cut and every seed bagged. A pair of griffa-green kites spiraled overhead, their keen eyes searching for prey. Naira shooed them away with a wave. Predators too close would draw unwanted attention. "Almost done," Ravel said, wiping sweat from her brow. "We must transport these sacks before the afternoon patrols depart." Naira nodded. "I'll take half. You take half. Meet at the North Pass." She slung a heavy sack over her shoulder and turned toward the field's perimeter. Tucked beneath the berm lay 3 custom-made harbor crates, lightweight odor-sealed containers that Revel had smuggled in. Once locked, they would conceal the grain's biosignature almost completely. Each crate held enough for 10 sacks, just under a cycle's ration for a settlement. Revel followed, carrying her own share. Her tattoos glowed brighter in the morning heat, each rune a testament to the life she'd breathed into this land. Naira studied her partner's face in the rising glow, determined, noble, but haunted by the knowledge that this harvest was only a temporary lifeline for both their peoples. Within an hour, the twins, guided by flickering handheld lanterns, had stashed the final sacks in the last crate. Naira secured the lid, sealing the latch with an Ithaden biolock that pulsed a deep teal. "Good," she whispered. "No prying sensor will read this as more than inert fodder." Revel pressed a palm against the crate's surface. "It will. Keep until the cloaking caravans arrive. The Guardian's transport ships will make their approach at nightfall. Until then, the harvest is ours." A distant rumble shattered the morning's calm, hovercraft engines slicing through the air like steel knives. Naira's stomach clenched. Patrols moved faster than she'd anticipated. "They're early," she muttered, the hammer of panic echoing in her veins. Garen's men must have caught wind of something. Moments later, the rumble intensified and a pair of sleek patrol hovercraft banked over the ridge. Their searchlights volleyed across the field, blades of light scanning for movement. Naira grabbed Rival's arm and pointed toward the crates. "Hide them behind the ridge's false cover." Rival dove behind a tangle of rocks, clutching her share of the sacks. Naira followed, shielding the girls. Above, the hovercraft swept low, the twin search beams converging on the now bare field. Painted with dust, the starved furrows glowed in the harsh light. Nothing here appeared to be harvesting gear. Just a standard run-of-the-mill Triton 9 test plot. On cue, the hovercraft banked away, their sensors apparently convinced. As the Patrol disappeared beyond the ridge. Naira exhaled, trembling. That was too close, she said. Revel helped her steady each breath. They didn't see our storage depots, she said. But Garen may redirect another patrol on the other side. Naira glared in the direction of their neighbor's homestead. A cliffside shack patched from rusted plating where Garen himself lived. Ever since Naira sank her last credits into the seed purchase, Garen's watchful gaze had grown more piercing. Whispers in the settlement spoke of his ambition. Rise to provincial office by exposing illicit technology. Now they had their proof. Lyra Sema, move down the eastern trail, Naira commanded. We'll circle back to regroup at the old supply depot. Carefully, keep low and stay silent. The twins grasped their sacks and melted into the underbrush. Naira and Raval hefted their own loads and moved westward along a narrow goat path that wound around rocky outcrops. Above, the sky seemed alienly blue. An echo of Rival's own homeland shimmered through the polluted haze. They reached the old supply depot, a ramshackle network of warehouses built into a canyon floor, without further disturbance. Here, Naira and Rival concealed the crates beneath fallen crates of broken automaton parts, masking them with discarded circuitry boards and empty fuel barrels. Once hidden, Rival peeled off her outer robes and withdrew a compact security shard from her pack. It purged all lingering biosignatures in the immediate vicinity. Safe for now, Rival whispered, collapsing onto a dirt floor littered with corrugated metal. But not for long. Naira sank beside her, removing her respirator mask and letting stale air rush her lungs. We've got enough here for weeks. My family can survive through the next season. But these seeds must reach Ithaden. If Garan finds them. She let the threat hang. Revel's eyes glowed with grim determination. We'll send a retrieval team. The Guardians will skim the ridge under cover of night. They'll take half for Ithaden and leave the rest below. Your daughters should eat well for a cycle, maybe two. Naira nodded, pressing a hand to her daughter's satchel. Good. Then we starve Garen of his leverage. He can run the field through the next full moon if he likes. He won't find a single grain. She met Rival's gaze. What about you? Rival's expression darkened. I must return to my ship. There are others among my people still starving in cryostasis chambers. I have to rescue them before Garan, or worse, the governor's elite. Find the crates and butcher the seed right there. Naira sank her head. I should come with you. No, Rival interrupted gently. Your place is here, with your daughters. I cannot put your life at further risk. She traced a glowing rune on Nira's forearm. This mark will guide our guardian vessel to you. By the third horizon, our rescue team will recover you and the girls. You must stay. Nira bit her lip but nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. Be safe, she said quietly. Riva leaned in and kissed Nira's forehead, a ghost of warmth that nevertheless made Nira's heart flutter. Soon, you'll meet my children, Rival promised. We'll be bound by gratitude and blood. They hugged in earnest, sweat mingling with dust on their skin. Then Rival rose, lifted her own share of sacks and vanished into the twisting canyon passages that led toward her ship, far above on a craggy mesa beyond the eastern ridge. Naira watched her go, the weight of both hope and dread settling into her bones. With Rival's departure, the onus of protecting the remaining harvest fell fully upon her. She sank to the cavern floor and closed her eyes, listening to the echoes of her daughter's laughter as they imagined fresh bread left in their futures. Night fell with the suddenness of a slammed door. Moonlight filtered through the crack in the depot's corrugated steel roof, casting mottled shadows across scattered debris. Naira sat stiffly against a wooden crate, clutching Nirveti, an antique Ithaden transmitter, pressed against her ear. The frequency was set to a private channel only Rival's people could access. Static hissed. For a moment, only the hum of distant wind. Then a soft voice crackled. Naira Miles? This is Captain Felix of the Guardians of Ithaden. Naira's heart leaped. Felix, I read you. How close are you? 2 hours from the ridge, we've marked the retrieval shuttle. Wait for the signal. 3 green flares from the eastern overlook. We'll land, secure the remaining grain, and evacuate your family and the rest of your settlement into our cloaked transport. Nira pressed her palm to her chest. Understood. We'll be ready. Be wary, Felix warned. Garen's patrols tighten by half moon. If he learns of Rival's ship, he'll hunt even more aggressively. Nira swallowed. We'll keep silent. No one here suspects Rival's involvement. We protect the secret. Good. We'll see you soon. The transmission ended. Nira raised her head and scanned the darkness around her. The depot's rafters creaked as a breeze snaked through holes in the metal roofing. Far above, the distant hills glowed faintly with phosphorescence from the training fields, inheritances of long-lost terraforming days. As she rose, Nira felt the awkward hitch of both relief and dread. Soon, she and her daughters would leave, Serenoa V behind, but not before someone betrayed what they had built. A soft scraping sound at the entrance made her spin. Cloaked in darkness, 2 shadowy figures emerged, Garen's enforcers, his second-in-command, Marith, and a lurker named Koib kneeling to search the upper crates. Nira's breath caught. She pressed her back against the far wall, heart pounding. The mangled rail of a broken gantry crane blocked part of her view, but she saw Marith prodding the crates with a vibro probe, looking for hidden compartments. Koib rifled through broken automaton arms, tossing aside severed wires and ground-up microcircuit shards. Marith, Koib hissed. I still smell something. Off! It's not just rust and rat piss down here. Marith gestured to him to be silent. With a gloved hand, she pushed aside metallic debris, revealing a faint outline of the harbor crates. Bolted lids gleamed under the moonlight. It's probably scrapsteroids, Marith said. She clicked open her datapad, scanning the crate's exterior. After a moment, her fingers froze over the interface. Well, Nira Miles's marks. Garen's orders. Verify nothing leaves these. Parts unsupervised. Budgets are tight. Koib scowled. You think Nira's hiding something bigger? Grains everywhere, just buy it off slot. Marith's eyes narrowed. Reputation has weight. The governor's both power-hungry and envious. If Nira's stash is linked to Athaden, that's cold credits for Garan. And power. He wants that. Keep digging. They brought out a portable lock breaker, a small cylindrical device that diamond-tip drills through fortified lids. Nira trembled against the wall, mind racing. If they cracked the seal, they'd find truth seeds that could exacerbate into riot-inducing speculation. Or worse, they'd confiscate the harvest and leave the settlement to starve. Worse still, any trace of Ithaden tech would bring the governor's elite, merciless enforcers known to execute on sight. She took a trembling breath and clutched the Nervetti. If she could jam their subspace comm channels even for a moment, she might guide Felix's squad to intercept, but standing to approach the enforcers risked drawing their attention. Instead, she whispered into the transmitter, Felix, 2 adversaries inside the depot. They're attempting to crack the crates. Request immediate extraction. 3 green. Flares in the sky. Static. No answer. Nira's pulse raced. She had no time. She let out a low whistle, an almost mournful pitch, barely audible. In a heartbeat, Marith and Koib froze, ears cocked. What was that? Marith demanded, turning toward the entrance. Enemy scout? Nira swallowed, heart racing. She edged backward along the wall, bending low. If she could slip past them and sprint to higher ground to fire her own flares, Felix might catch the signal. But if she moved now, Marith snapped her fingers. Koib, keep drilling, I'll check it out. Koib crouched, the lockbreaker's diamond tip glowing red as it carved into the metal lid. Sparks flew, clanging echoes vibrant in the confined space. Nira crept toward the exit, mind whirring. One flake of dust too many, one misstep, and she'd be caught. Reaching a small aperture near the depot's roof, Nira slipped through and found herself on a narrow ledge overlooking the wasteland beyond. She saw the eastern overlook, a rocky promontory that jutted from the ridge like a gnarled fist. If she climbed, she could fire the flares, though the ascent in darkness would be perilous. But what choice did she have? With the crates on the brink of compromise, every second counted. She climbed swiftly, using jagged rock edges to hoist herself up. The twins, hidden inside the depot, would hunker down, but Rival's people needed that signal. As her fingertips found the final foothold on the promontory, a sudden flash of emerald light cut across the sky, 3 streaks of glowing green flares bursting against the stars. Naira froze, heart pounding as the flares illuminated the horizon. She watched as an Ithidon interceptor, a sleek manta-winged craft, banked low over the ridge, its chameleonic hull shimmering to match the starlit desert beneath. It dipped and made a tight landing in the nearby canyon, its underbelly thrusters barely stirring dust. A squad of 4 Ithidon silhouettes materialized, rifles held at the ready, visors gleaming. They moved toward the depot, strides confident and silent. Below, Naira saw Mareth and Koib's torches flicker as they frantically scrambled back into the depot. The lockbreaker had made progress. Deep grooves ran across the crate's lid. Naira cursed under her breath, then hefted her own small flare gun, stolen from Garan's stores. Without hesitation, she fired 2 more green flares in rapid succession as a backup signal. The Ithidon squad's heads jerked upward. They broke into a sprint, rifles raised. Naira's blood pounded as she scrambled down the rocky face. Before she could slip, a cluster of gravel shifted beneath her foot. A sharp crack echoed through the canyon. Naira's heart leapt. In the depot, below, she heard the shriek of metal. Koib had broken through the weakened lid. "No," she gasped, sprinting down the slope. She landed hard near the depot entrance, dust whipping around her. The Ithidons closed in behind her, silent shadows coalescing in the moonlight. Naira burst through the door just as Koib pried open the crate. Glistening seed heads spilled across the floor, opaline grains that glimmered with living light. Koib's eyes widened in triumph as he seized 2 sacks and dashed toward the exit. Mareth barked, "Stop him!" Koib lunged for the corridor, but Naira, with a mother's fury, stepped in his path. "You will not take that," she snarled, gripping Koib's wrist and wrenching 1 sack free. The Ithidon squad filled the doorway. Captain Felix, at their head, luminous eyes narrowed. "Stand down," Felix commanded in a calm but forceful tone. His rifle was trained on Koib. Mareth hesitated, gaze flicking between her subordinate and the Ithidon soldiers. Reval strode in from the shadows behind them, bruised but standing tall, clutching the final 2 sacks. "Naira, your children?" Reval asked, scanning the crates. Naira turned, heart in her throat, and screamed, "Lyra! Sema!" From the depot's other side, Lyra and Sema burst out, tears streaking their faces. They ran to Naira and she swept them into her arms, clinging so tightly it hurt. Rival knelt beside them, brushing a strand of dust-streaked hair from Lyra's cheek. Captain Felix motioned to his squad. "Secure the harvest." 2 Ithidon soldiers knelt by the crates, hastily relatching sharp locks and activating bioseals. Naira felt Rival's presence at her back, calm but resolute. Mareth stepped forward, anger flaring in her eyes. "You thieves! I'll see the governor's head for this treachery." Felix's gaze was ice. "That claim is recorded. But your patrol was unauthorized. These people acted to save lives. You will stand down." Mareth's fingers twitched toward her sidearm, but before she could draw, an Ithidon bolt rifle discharged a non-lethal shock round that sent her crashing backward. She landed in a heap of rusted scrap, groaning as the voltage pulsed through her body. Naira's gaze burned with both triumph and sorrow. The harvest was safe, but she had seen the disdain in Mareth's eyes, vengeance already kindling. She looked to Rival. "Will they come back?" she asked in a whisper. Rival nodded slowly, though her voice remained soft. "The governor will be furious, but our cloaking transport will lift before dawn. By then they cannot reach us." She placed a gentle hand on Naira's shoulder. "We have what we came for." Naira kissed her daughter's hair. "Let's go home." She motioned toward the depot's back exit, where the Ithidon squad had set up temporary hangars. An Ithidon emissary waited by a grav lift, a soft green hollow displaying their cloaking signature. Lyra and Sema clung to Naira's legs. "Mama," Sema whimpered. Are we going to Ithidon? Naira knelt, looking into her daughter's tearful eyes. Not yet, she answered, her voice firm. First, we help our settlement with this harvest. Then, when it's safe, we leave. For Ithidon with Revel, Lyra sniffled, hope flickering. You promise? Naira smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. I promise. As dawn's first light began to flicker pale and cold, Nira, Reval, Lyra, Sema, and the Ithidon squad loaded the last crates of seed onto a small grav chute. Nira took one last look at the abandoned depot, the place where hope had been born and nearly stolen. With a final nod to Reval, she stowed her shoulder against the twins and prepared to face whatever came next. An uneasy peace in a dust-choked settlement that would feast on Ithidon grain until the harvest's whispers faded, and the promise of a future in the stars. Above them, the cloaking transport shimmered into view. With a quiet hum, it lifted off, bearing the seeds of two worlds and the bond of two mothers across the starlit sky, leaving behind a planet poised on the edge of renewal and a betrayal that would not soon be forgotten. Night's velvet cloak wrapped Serenoa 5 in silence, broken only by the distant hum of Ithidon thrusters as the cloaked transport vanished beyond the horizon. At the abandoned depot's edge, Naira stood with Reval, Lyra, and Sema, each clutching a small satchel of truth seed grain warmed by the residual glow of Ithidon runes. The air smelled of spent fuel, dust, and something new, possibility. Revel turned to Naira, her pale eyes reflecting the dying green light of the crate lids. They'll be safe, she said softly, voice laced with relief. The Guardians will shepherd the rest of my people to orbit and then to Ithidon. Once we're gone, the governor will never suspect where these seeds came from. Naira nodded, though weariness tugged at her bones. She glanced at her daughters, who huddled together beneath her arm. Lyra's usually bright gaze was now tempered by exhaustion, while Sema leaned against her leg, eyelids heavy. In only a few sols, they had seen more danger than most children would face in a lifetime. Let's return home, Naira said. Our settlement will need us to oversee distribution. They threaded through the rocky trail leading back to the settlement of Garhold, a cluster of corrugated huts and ramshackle dwellings built into a series of narrow canyons. Even by Serenoa V's harsh standards, Garhold was poor. Yards strewn, with rusting automaton wreckage, dried water troughs, and the skeletal remains of half-starved livestock. But on this night, a new energy pulsed through its crooked streets. Lanterns glowed in windows, and small gatherings of neighbors huddled around crackling braziers, whispering urgent rumors. Nira spotted Garen's homestead at the canyon's mouth, a squat makeshift tower of corrugated plates and wooden beams. In the low light, its form seemed more fragile than ever. Naira's chest tightened. Garen had spent the last 2 sols coordinating patrols, interrogating neighbors, and even offering bounties for information about Revel's origins. Yet tonight he remained conspicuously absent. Revel's hand tightened on Nira's arm as they approached the central trading post, where Nira had arranged to meet the settlement elders. Old banners, tattered bits of white cloth, were draped between support beams painted with crude symbols indicating gather and share. Once they reached the trading post's courtyard, the elders fell silent, eyes flicking from Naira's dusty face to the small satchels of grain she carried. Elder Marin, stooped and hunched from decades of toil, stepped forward first, trembling with anticipation. Naira, he raspy whispered, tell us it's true. Will this feed us through the lean season? Naira drew a deep breath and unfurled the satchel, tilting it so that truth seeds spilled onto her palm. Each kernel shimmered, with shifting opalescence as though containing a living galaxy. The settlement gasped collectively. These are Ithidon truth seeds, Naira began, voice clear. In less than a cycle, 7 sols, you will have enough harvest to feed every person in Garhold for an entire year. After that, my daughters and I will teach you how to sow and nurture them safely. She raised her hand, letting a single seed rest between her index finger and thumb. No one can use these to create weapons. They bond with the soil's native bacteria. They repair the land, not corrupt it. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Elder Siren, a tall woman whose face was lined with worry, lifted the seed to the lantern light and traced its ridges with a trembling fingertip. A miracle, she breathed. But where did they come from? Reval stepped forward, hood cast back to reveal her glowing tattoos. Despite the tiredness etched into her features, she stood tall and unbowed. I am Rival of Ithaden, she announced. My people once lived on this planet. Its ancient records bear our name. When our world fell, we wandered among the stars, searching for refuge. When we discovered Serenoa Fee's soil might still be healed, we knew we had to try. With Naira's help, we have saved these seeds. Please accept them as a gift, a way to revive this land that both our peoples call home. Gasps of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Some settlers clutched at Rival's hands, tears shining in their eyes. Others stepped back, warily eyeing the blue-black alien who spoke. A low rumble of tension slithered through the gathering. Xenophobia lingered, especially after war stories of Ithaden bioweapons haunted old-timers. Elder Marin raised a gnarled hand. Will they poison our children? He asked, voice wavering with suspicion. Revel shook her head. No. I have purified the soil here, and the seeds will bond harmlessly. They will grow only what we plant. Please, test them in small plots before full planting. I swear on the memory of Kentharis, the first Ithaden queen, that I mean you no harm. Silence fell as the settlers exchanged glances. Finally, Elder Siren stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Marin's shoulder. We stand with Naira. She has given us hope before. We accept this gift. She turned to the crowd. Let us begin our first test plot at dawn. A cheer rose up, reverberating against the canyon walls. Revel bowed her head, tears glinting in her eyes. Naira pressed the satchel to her chest and felt the weight of gratitude, of debts that could never be repaid. At first light, under a blood orange, Sky, Naira, Rival, and a council of settlers trekked back to the reclaimed test field. Men and women carried simple wooden plows, old hoes, and large terracotta watering vessels. Using Naira's instructions, they created 2 small demonstration plots, each no larger than 10 paces square, within the center of the former harvest site. Naira and Rival jointly demonstrated the preparation. First, laying ashes dredged from old machinery fires to boost pH balance, then evenly scattering a handful of truth seeds over the loosened earth. Finally, hosing the row with Rival's remaining nutrient colonies. Rumors spread rapidly as neighbors watched. See how the seed hums under her fingers. Look at the soil turning black with cleansing bacteria. Marine, using a portable spectrometer scavenged from a derelict drone, confirmed what Naira had claimed. Chemical toxins in the soil had plummeted by 82%. The crowd erupted in astonished wonder. For many, this was the first sign that Serenoa Fee might still be redeemable. Throughout that day, the settlers dug and seeded plot by plot. Rival moved from group to group, teaching them the delicate art of injecting biomycelia into the nodes at day 3, showing them how to cloak the fields from provincial drones, methods she had used herself. Under the midday sun, Naira knelt, in the final demonstration plot, sweeping her hand over the planted seeds. A faint green glow pulsed like a heartbeat beneath her palm, astounding onlookers. Tomorrow, she told the gathering, you will see sprouts. That evening, when the settlement's children crowded around the new plots, Naira and Rival guided them in sprinkling fine metal dust around the perimeters, enough to scatter scanners without harming the plants. As dusk fell, tiny halos of luminescent spores drifted upward, mingling with lantern smoke to create a surreal greenish-gold haze. The fields looked alive in the twilight, as if Serenoa Fif itself had taken a breath of renewal. Worried faces relaxed, smiles spread. Old disputes over rations and water rights seemed insignificant in the face of a collective purpose: saving their world. The governor's reach felt distant now, its threats dulled by the promise of an actual harvest. 2 sols later, Naira awakened before dawn, drawn by a soft pulse beneath her hut's floorboards. She slipped outside, leaving Lyra and Sema still sleeping in a tangle of blankets. Dawn's first rays had yet to breach the canyons, but a rosy glow tinted the horizon. Naira hurried to the main demonstration plot, heart quickening. She arrived, just as the settlers emerged, lanterns in hand. In the pinkish half-light, the rows of newly sown truth seeds lay blanketed beneath silver-green shoots, every stalk at least a finger's width tall. The field thrummed with microbial life, the air alive with humid warmth. A cheer rose from the settlers. Mothers lifted toddlers to show them, men exchanged triumphant grins, and Naira felt tears sting her eyes. Revel arrived, weary but smiling. She moved to Naira's side and laid a hand on her shoulder. "It has begun," she said softly. "Life." Naira nodded, overwhelmed by gratitude. "You have given us a second chance." Rival's bioluminescent tattoos brightened in response. "We save each other. Your daughters will help restore Ithaden one day." Lyra darted toward them, breathless. "Mama, Mama, the grain. Look." She pointed to the nearest shoot, where a tiny cluster of beginnings promised a future harvest. Sema ran to Naira's other side, hugging her waist. "When can we make bread, Mama?" Naira knelt to embrace both girls. "Soon," she whispered, pressing a kiss to each forehead. "Soon." By the time the second week's sun blazed overhead, the fields had burgeoned into a sea of emerald green stalks, each crowned with nascent seed heads, shimmering in early summer light. The settlers had expanded beyond the initial plots, carving terraces along the canyon floor to channel groundwater from distant aquifers. They toiled in shifts, women and men working side by side, clearing rocks, constructing new irrigation channels, and inoculating each node with Rival's biomycelia. Garen's approach to the trading post grew more desperate. He arrived daily, offering to oversee security and fair distribution, hoping to leverage his old influence. But the elders, emboldened by the miraculous yield, refused his authority. When he tried to confiscate a single sack of grain, the entire settlement blocked his path, chanting Naira's name. Garen's face turned ashen. He realized he had lost whatever hold he once had. One evening, under the double moon's pale light, Garen appeared at Naira's doorstep, hat in hand. Behind him trailed a handful of his old loyalists, now uncertain of their leader's purpose. Naira stood in the doorway, the twins at her side, while Rival hovered a step behind, arms crossed. Garen's voice wavered, desperation clear. "Naira, you've undone everything. Those seeds, they're unnatural. The governor will come." Naira's gaze was steely. "The governor will come whether you help or not." She held up a satchel of mature grain, full and heavy. "These seeds feed us. They heal this land. If you accept that, we can find your place in the new order." Behind Naira, settlers emerged into the courtyard, torches flickering. Some held hoes. Others bore sacks of harvested grain, proof that in only 2 weeks the yield surpassed all expectations. Garen's eyes darted among them, realization dawning that his ambitions had reached a dead end. His shoulders slumped, and he dropped, his hat to the dusty ground. "I understand," he whispered. "I was wrong." Naira gave a curt nod. "Then help us ensure this harvest reaches everyone. Train your clan to tend these fields. Otherwise, leave Garhold." Garen's lip quivered. After a long moment, he dared a nod. "I will help." Naira's shoulders eased. "Then begin by filling those sacks. Tomorrow we start distribution." By the end of the month, 20 sols after the initial sowing, the first full harvest came in. Each stalk bore plump, opalescent seed heads that glowed faintly as they were cut. Naira, Revel, Lyra, and Sema joined the settlers in the final reap, the harvest teams moving in well-practiced flocks along each terrace. Every cut released a soft musical hum as truth seeds fell into waiting baskets, their layered husks glinting under the midday sun. At the end of the day, every family in Garhold had received enough grain to last through the next drought. No longer Would mothers trade plasma packs or sell digits for noodle pods? Instead, they'd have true flour, true bread, something for their children to savor. Laughter echoed through the cannons as children chased each other among the harvested rows, scattering leftover husks in joyous abandon. Naira watched as Raval knelt in the last row, pressing her hands into the soil and murmuring a quiet blessing. In Ithidine, a lullaby for fields. Rival's tattoos glowed like pulsing stars, and the living bacteria seeped upward in gentle spirals of green light. Naira approached, placing a hand on Rival's shoulder. "It's beautiful," Naira said softly. "You've healed so much." Revel rose, eyelashes thick with tears. "Not I alone. You believed in this land. Your daughters believed. Every settler here believed. Without that faith, none of this would have lived." She looked out over the fields. "Now, we cannot forget. We must guard these seeds, share them, and let this place bloom anew." Naira nodded. "We will." She spotted Elder Sieran approaching, carrying a small carved box made from Ithadan alloy. Inside lay a single truth seed, set into black velvet. Kieran held it with reverence. "On behalf of Garhold, we honor both our people's futures," she said. "A seed for a new world." Nira and Raval exchanged glances as Kieran extended the box to them. Together they knelt before it. Naira pressed a hand to the velvet beneath the grain, feeling the faint pulse beneath her palm. Raval placed her cool fingertips over Naira's. "To what end?" Raval whispered. "To what end, indeed," Naira echoed. "To what horizons will we carry these seeds?" Rival's bioluminescent tattoos flickered in agreement. "We will carry them to Ithaden's reclaimed fields where our people wait. We will teach them this new method, so that Ithaden once more becomes a beacon, and in turn they will help Serenoa 5 bloom beyond our canyons. Other settlements will learn. Other worlds may yet be saved." Lyra and Sema stood behind them, their wide eyes shining with wonder. Sema reached forward, stroking Rival's glowing tattoo. "One day," she said, voice barely a whisper, "I want to plant seeds on Ithaden too." Rival knelt, placing her hand over Sema's. "And you shall, little one. The path is open." Naira rose, gathering Lyra and Sema into her arms. In that moment, the canyon's walls seemed to recede. The scattered settlements stretched into one united field. A tapestry of hope woven by 2 mothers, 2 cultures, and countless grateful hearts. Weeks later, as the second harvest took shape, Nira and Rival prepared for their journey to Ithaden. The cloaked transport had returned, hidden, within the desert gloom, bringing word that it was time. Rival's people, now awakened from stasis and sequestered in orbit, awaited a new beginning. On the day of departure, Garhold's settlement gathered at the edge of the newly flourishing fields. The air was heady with the scent of green stalks and healing earth. Rival's sons and daughters, young Ithaden refugees who would finally set foot on stable ground, played with Garhold's children among the furrows. Overhead, the twin suns cast long morning shadows gilding the tips of sprouting seed heads. Elder Kieran, robes loosened, eyes bright with tears, stepped forward. In her weathered hands, she held a small woven basket containing the final demonstration, seed, now poised in rich earth. Nira Miles and Raval of Ithaden, her voice rang clear. "You have given us more than grain. You have seeded hope, trust, and a shared future. On behalf of Garhold, we bid you safe passage. Carry our gratitude to your people." Naira clasped Kieran's hands and nodded. "We carry you with us." She turned to Raval. "Are you ready?" Raval placed her hand on her chest over the glowing tattoos that still pulsed softly, more than ever. Lyra and Sema raced to stand between them, faces flushed with excitement. Raval crouched to embrace the twins, pressing delicate kisses on their foreheads. "Remember me," she whispered, "and I will remember you. When you plant on Ithaden, think of these fields." Sema's eyes brimmed as she nodded. "I will." Nira drew Raval into a final embrace. "May the stars guide you," she murmured. Raval's bioluminescence flared brightly for a heartbeat as though smiling. and may Serenoa Phi stand green again. The cloaked transport descended in a spiral of shifting light. As the ramp lowered, Revel's children vanished into the ship's hold, laughing together under lantern light. Revel turned, her pale eyes finding Naira's one last time. "Until we meet again," she said. Naira watched as Reval and her daughters boarded, then closed her eyes, letting the twin suns' warmth settle over her. Lyra and Sama tugged at her sleeves. "Mama?" Lyra said tentatively. "When will Reval come back?" Naira smiled down at them, voice soft. "When Ithaden blooms again." She gathered them close and looked out over the fields. Fertile terraces feeding every household, families working side by side, and the promise of new Agropolis reaching beyond the canyons. Above, the cloaked transport shimmered and rose, slipping into the morning sky like a ghost. Below, Naira stood with her daughters, the settlement behind them. Shields no longer needed, for the land had begun to heal. In that moment, she felt a surge of unwavering conviction. The bond between human and Ithaden would endure, carried on the wings of seeds that healed the soil and united two peoples. As the ship vanished into starlight, Naira turned to her daughters and whispered, "Let's tend these fields." And so, in the heart of a once barren world, a new era dawned, one seeded by courage, nourished by unity, and destined to grow beyond horizons yet unseen.